Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather on this 23rd day of July 2020. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, fire danger map, and again, not a lot on there. Notably, there is a extreme fire danger there around the Dehne area. And then that's surrounded a little more extensive area of high to very high fire danger south of that into the central Seward Peninsula, and then a little bit off to the east there, roughly south of Selawik or so. And then also the Susitna Valley north of Willow has areas of high to maybe very high fire danger in that area. Otherwise, remainder of the state looking really good, especially southern Alaska, especially compared to a year ago. And from there, taking a look at the hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere for the interior of the state or even marine zones, as in gale warnings. There's none of that going on anywhere. So looking like, at least in that regard, a couple of good days coming up here for all of Alaska. And from there, we will go to satellite imagery. And a storm system pushing southward there from the Arctic, you can see, brought a fair amount of rain to the western North Slope, into the north slopes of the Brooks Range and DeLong Mountain areas, with Mead River picking about 9/10 or just under 9/10 of an inch of precipitation in the last 24 hours. And other areas had anywhere from a third to half an inch of rain. Kelly, farther to the south there, had about half an inch of precipitation, while Barrow had 4/10 of an inch. And then Ambler picked up about 1/10 of an inch. That's good for a wetting rain in Ambler in that area in the Kobuk Valley. But Kotzebue, I believe, only had 3/100ths of an inch as that moisture pushed south there. And gusty winds associated with that system kicked up as high as about 50 miles an hour at Cape Lisburne earlier today. Well, actually a few hours ago, ahead of that front as it pushes southward, and rain spreading eastward to Deadhorse this afternoon at about 3 p.m. They're reporting winds gusting upwards of about 30 miles an hour with light rain falling there. And then there's a break over St. Lawrence Island. You see clear skies in that area. Sunshine, both reported at Savunga and Gamble. That extends in across the Yukon Delta and into much of the southwest interior, away from the coast, and also across the Kuskokwim Valley, in across southern Alaska, Madanuska-Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, and most of the Copper River Basin, as well as Prince William Sound. Mostly sunny day today, with temperatures in the 60s, some cases rising into the lower to mid-70s, as in the case of Broadview on the Kenai Peninsula, had 75 this afternoon, with 72 at Big Lake and Willow, and also areas of the Copper River Basin in the lower 70s. Up to the north, some sunshine over the Yukon Flats, and Beaver pushed up to 70 degrees at mid-afternoon. And rain, heaviest this afternoon today over the southern panhandle, lighter up to the north, becoming more showery and tending to taper off with the system moving through there. Out west, large low pressure area over the south-southwest Bering Sea, or southwestern Bering, pushing the front eastward, and that brought wind gusts close to 50 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour at Cold Bay, with rain, light rain, really not heavy rain with this, just areas of light rain. St. George picked up about 1/1500ths of an inch of precipitation with this, and rain just now reaching the southwest coast. A little bit of an increase in the winds, not too strong though. Cape Newton, I'm seeing gusts 25 miles an hour, but that's one of the normally windier areas there. And breezy out over the central Aleutians, with ADAC catching wind gusts about 36 miles per hour, with low clouds, fog, rain, and drizzle in those areas, with showers back to Shemya and more of a northwest wind there. Otherwise, the trough rain over the southern southeast coast today, and lighter amounts up to the north. In the last 12 hours, Juneau had about 2/10 of an inch, and then by contrast, Craig, Wrangell, and Sitka had roughly around 4/10 of an inch, and that'll continue to taper off this evening. Scattered showers developing over the Wrangell Mountains and the eastern Alaska Range on up to the Yukon River near Eagle, and then thunderstorms real isolated. There were about only 3 or 4 strikes as of mid-afternoon, and those are the locations I tagged there from the Eastern Brooks Range, and one in the central interior, and a single strike west of Cook Inlet there in the Alaska Range. And clouds on the increase across Kodiak Island today as its flow becomes more southwesterly, but remain dry. Tonight, as that weakening front pushes in, Alaska Peninsula is going to take a bite out of the precipitation field associated with that. Just look for a few showers to arrive on the southwest side of Kodiak Island, while the state airport up across Fognak Island remains dry, but clouds will continue to slowly thicken and lower. Clouds later tonight will increase over the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet area, as well as the Madanuska, Susitna Valley, but should stay partly or mostly fair for the North Gulf Coast, eastward to Yakutat, and showers end over the Panhandle, but tend to linger on through morning or until through late tonight there for Stewart and Hyder. But generally just cloudy skies with low clouds and fog possible along the coast there of the Panhandle. Up to the north, that weakening Arctic front continues to slide south-southeastward with a low center pulling eastward there just off the eastern Arctic coast. So periods of light rain and drizzle will continue in that area with a band of showers extending along the frontal boundary, which is quite weak there across the Brooks Range into the Kobuk Valley towards the northern Seward Peninsula areas. And look for showers to continue over the eastern interior areas and taper off down toward the Alaska Range, and stays breezy, windy, and wet with low clouds, fog, and drizzle for IFR flying conditions over much of the Aleutians and possibly the western Alaska Peninsula northward. Until you get to St. Lawrence Island, should hold on to the fair VFR flying conditions through tonight there, as well as in across Norton Sound along the Yukon River area. But showers possible up around Beaver and Fort Yukon. And then for the forecast for Friday, looking wet over southern Alaska. That low center pushes moisture up, so pretty good chance of rain across much of the southern interior, definitely the North Gulf Coast, and that extends northward into the central interior as well, and actually all the way up to the Arctic coast, starting to dry out back along the northwest coast and western Arctic coast with a few showers along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area, and the central eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula continued occasionally wet. Wind's not much of a factor though, but definitely IFR flying conditions there. Showers for Kodiak Island, and showers again tomorrow for the southeast coast. And moving on to the first day of the weekend, looks really wet. Couple of wet days coming up for southern Alaska, with Saturday looking wetter than tomorrow, with moderate rain pushing up across Kodiak Island into the southern Cook Inlet area, southern Kenai Peninsula over to Kamishak Bay, and on up along the western Alaska Range. Looks like a wet day for the Kuskokwim Valley. Cloudy with showers for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and also moderate showers across the central and eastern interior, all the way down to the eastern North Gulf Coast, with showers extending almost up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. But the North Slope, look for partly sunny skies, as well as the central Seward Peninsula, and that's about it as far as any sunshine goes. Bering Sea, again, low clouds, fog, and light winds all the way up through the Bering Strait and the Arctic coast, and showers again continue over the Panhandle. And the next system will move in to at least bring rain to the southern southeast coast Saturday evening. Lows tonight, mid-30s to lower 40s for the North Slope and Arctic coast, with lower 50s for the most part over southern Alaska. Some areas dropping into the upper 40s, especially over the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, even with the increase in the clouds and precipitation, still looking at mid to upper 60s southern Alaska to near 70 in the Copper River Basin, and upper 50s, lower 60s for the Panhandle, and 55 to 65 over the central interior, to upper 30s to mid 40s to near 50 over the North Slope. Lows the following morning, 30s for the North Slope and Arctic coast, 45 to 53 for the central interior, as well as southern Alaska, and upper 40 or mid 40s to near 50 for the Bering Sea and Alaska Peninsula. Highs on Saturday, mid 60s to Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, and lower to mid 60s over the eastern interior areas.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to Friday morning's flying weather graphic, we've got IFR across much of the Arctic coast on down to the Bering Strait, northern Seward Peninsula, and toward Kotzebue Sound. VFR, St. Lawrence Island, back to the IFR, much of the northern Bering Sea from just north of St. Matthew Island and into the Yukon Delta coast, Bristol Bay, and southward, covering just about all of the Aleutians with marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula. IFR, Kodiak Island, up along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, and the North Gulf Coast, and the western half of the Panhandle. And for the afternoon Friday, IFR, much of the Arctic coast, all the way through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island now, that the VFR zone shifting southward, or actually from right around St. Matthew Island, pretty narrow band in across the northern Yukon Delta. And then right on up the Yukon River Valley there to the border, where it expands northward and southward into the Copper River Basin. IFR, northern Panhandle, and along the coast, marginal VFR, southern inside waters. IFR, Gulf of Alaska, and much of the North Gulf Coast, but becoming VFR for Kodiak Island into Kamishak Bay. IFR on the western slopes of the western Alaska Range on up to around Windy Pass. And that becomes even more widespread on Saturday. Kuskokwim Valley looks pretty IFR, or look for IFR conditions of the Kuskokwim Valley Saturday morning. And they'll extend down the river valley there to the Delta and all of the coast, all of the Bering Sea IFR, all of the Aleutians IFR, through the Bering Strait, North Slope, Arctic coast, all IFR. VFR are pretty hard to come by, but there'll be some scattered areas over the interior Saturday morning. And also Saturday afternoon, looks like VFR for the Upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country to Eagle and northward, as well as a good portion of the Copper River Basin, IFR along the Alaska Range, central and east western areas, marginal VFR, almost all of the southwest interior, with some IFR, Kuskokwim Bay, and IFR in the Bering Sea, with marginal VFR scattered with IFR over the Aleutians, marginal for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, IFR south side, IFR Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound eastward to Yakutat, and either IFR or marginal for the Panhandle. Passes Friday morning, or Friday, the day Friday, and Atuvik and Atigan both look for marginal VFR, either entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, westerly flow, could be VFR on the eastern entrance, both passes. Rainy, IFR in the western entrance, otherwise marginal. And for windy, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And Isabel, same trend, marginal to start with IFR conditions to finish by late afternoon. And Mintesta, I think it'll stay VFR there the entire day, optimistically. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. And Portage, same trend, VFR becoming marginal VFR into the afternoon. And for Chilkoot and White, starting out marginal, becoming IFR. For the freezing levels, 6,000 feet there from the northern Koyukuk and upper Yukon Valley areas on out to the Arctic coast, and then 8,000 feet extending southward to the Susitna Valley, 10,000 feet from, say, Port Moller down across Kodiak Island, 8,000 feet for the Panhandle, Gulf of Alaska, and 4,000 feet there coming in with that cool upper low there, 4,000 feet over Atka Island, and 8 to 10,000 feet over the northern Bering. Icing could be some considerable moderate rime icing for Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula area with the main frontal boundary. Otherwise, areas of light to isolated moderate mixed icing farther north and west, and then some more rime icing of the isolated moderate variety there from the Alaska Peninsula westward to Adak. Jet stream. Upper low along the eastern Arctic coast, and then another one there over the east central Aleutians. So 100-knot jet just south of the Fox Islands, 9,000 feet. 40-knot westerlies there just south of the central Aleutians. Upper low there off the eastern Arctic coast, northerly flow over the Chukchi Sea. And 3,000 feet, we've got that, again, a low over the eastern Arctic coast. Another one now just east of Noatak, with light winds really over much of interior Alaska, and turbulence, moderate chop below 5,000 feet, central Aleutians, light to isolated moderate chop below 5,000 feet for Lynn Canal.
Hey there, there, planetoids. Trace here for Stargazers, and wow, there are so many planets up in the sky this week. Pop outside around midnight with a chair, warm blankets, and maybe a nice beverage and look south. Because of the new moon, it will be really dark for this planet party, and you should immediately notice Jupiter and Saturn, which are both at or close to opposition if you remember from last week. But if you turn east or left and follow the ecliptic, around 1 a.m. you'll see the ruddy glow of Mars, which is amazing, right? Now is the time to borrow a telescope because, wow, you can spot Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. If you wait until around 4 a.m., you're going to see Venus rising over the horizon. If you're really ambitious, you can stick around till Mercury rises just before the sun at its westernmost point in the sky, its western elongation. With so much to see, wow, how can you not keep looking up?
The Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge is a refuge in Alaska. It's the third largest refuge in the National Wildlife Refuge System. North of Fairbanks, it's a vast ecosystem of wetlands. What drives this refuge are natural forces of fire, ice, and water.
The Yukon Flats has got a really interesting history. Back in the late 50s, early 1960s, there was a proposal to dam the Yukon River down by Rampart, which is downstream of the Yukon Flats. And it was a hydroelectric proposal. And so in order to assess the merits of that proposal, people got together because they were a little bit concerned about what the impacts might be on the Yukon Flats, the habitat, and all the people living within the Yukon Flats Refuge. There's quite a few people living within the refuge. We have 7 villages. So in order to figure out how special the Yukon Flats was, the Fish and Wildlife Service banded over 40,000 ducks within the Yukon Flats. And using the band return information, they found out that those ducks were using 45 of the 50 lower 48 states. They were using 7 foreign countries, and they were using most of the provinces over in Canada, as well as all the major flyways down in the lower 48. And so that identified that the Yukon Flats was a special breeding area, and that information, along with a lot of other public information that was gathered during that whole process, really ensured that the dam never did go in, and thus the habitat was preserved.
So what that did is it really highlighted the national importance of this area and how important conserving this particular area is for conserving many other natural areas in the lower 48 and even across the continent.
To protect the Yukon Flats Refuge because we have responsibility towards our future generations to leave land protected in the state that it is now. The Yukon Flats is a wild place. The ecosystem is intact and functioning, and you can't find that very many places in the rest of the U.S.
The Yukon Flats Refuge is among the most important places for ducks. So each spring, millions of ducks, and in addition to shorebirds and geese, raptors and loons, they all fly to the refuge to nest and rear their young. And the reason they are attracted to this area is because it has really enriched wetlands. There are lots of nutrients in the wetlands that provide a lot of food for the growing young.
We also have a lot of predator, prey species like bears and black bears, grizzly bears, wolves. We also have a lot of moose and fur bearers that use the refuge. So overall, there's just a great diversity of both upland, lowland, and migratory bird species that use the refuge.
Most people know the Flats as a duck nursery, and that was one of the main purposes that was designed for, but a lot of recent research over the last decade has really illustrated how important it is to a variety of native endemic fish species for subsistence and recreational and commercial fisheries throughout the entire Yukon River Basin and out to supporting commercial fisheries out to the Bering Sea as well. So it supports a variety of different whitefish and salmon species, the northern pike, a little bit of everything that people rely on as cultural identities, but also for subsistence resources and where people go to recreate and enjoy being outside.
The type of recreation that you're going to find on Yukon Flats Refuge is very primitive. And what that often does is it gives people a complete break from some of the stresses of today's world. There are no cell phone towers out there. There are no roads. There are no trails. So any type of recreation that people have is entirely natural. The lands and waters within the Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge are open to the public to enjoy. And that's a really important tenet upon which the United States is built.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, not a lot different from yesterday's. Sea ice free there along much of the western, or all of the western Arctic coast on down in toward the strait, of course, and a little more open there east of Wrangel Island. And then the pack ice pulling a little bit farther to the north than what it has been, but again, really hard to tell from a difference from what we had yesterday. So coastal water forecast here for the south coast, outer coastline, west winds 10 knots tomorrow, 5 to 6 foot seas, and then south-southwest breeze at 10 for the north coast with 4 to 5 foot seas. Central southern inside waters, winds will be southerly, but only at 10 knots with slight seas. Different story for Lynn Canal, looking at south winds sustained at 20 knots with minimum gale gusts at 35 knots and seas at around 4 feet. Those will lose the gale gusts for Lynn Canal on Saturday, but keep south 20 knots sustained in the forecast. And for Stevens Passage, southeast at 10 knots, Clarence Strait, southeast 15. And for much of the coastline, southerly winds at 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas, a little lighter up toward Yakutat from the southeast at 15. Cook Inlet, north of the Foreland, southeast winds tomorrow at 10 knots. South of the Foreland, southerlies at 15. Kamishak Bay, southeast winds 15 knots. Barren Islands, a little brisker with a 20-knot wind from the southwest. And for the North Gulf Coast, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound, east winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And those will become southeast at 20 with 4-foot seas for Prince William Sound on Saturday. Eastern North Gulf Coast, southerlies at 20 knots. Otherwise, for the western North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands, both will be south at 15. Kamishak Bay, light winds, southerlies at 10 knots. And southern Cook Inlet will be south at 15. North of the Forelands, though, south at 10. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories tomorrow. Southwest winds 25 knots, 7 to 8 foot seas, including Shelikof Strait. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, small craft advisories, west 25 knots, 7 foot seas, and then Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, southwest 25, 9 foot seas, lighter winds on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula from the south at 15 knots, and Bristol Bay, west 25 foot seas. Outlook for Saturday, west 15 for Bristol Bay, and southwest 15 to 20 knots for Kodiak Island. West 20 knots for the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula from Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, but the top side there, northwest 15, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories for the western Aleutians tomorrow for 25 to 30 knot winds there from the area of Shemya over toward at least Amchitka Island, and westerlies also for Adak and Atka. Small craft advisories for west winds 25 to 30 knots, seas Pacific side up to 13 feet. And for the Fox Islands, southwest, 20 to 30 knots, 6 to 11 foot seas. Outlook for Saturday, lighter winds there. Unalaska Island, northwest 15 to 20. Otherwise, Unmak Island, west 15 to 20. Adak south 10 to 20 knots, 4 to 6 foot seas. And southeast at 20 knots for Kiska Island. And then for the western Aleutians, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots, 7 foot seas. North winds at 20 for St. Lawrence Island tomorrow for the southwest coast. Southwest wind at 15. South 10 for the Pribilofs with 5 foot seas. St. Matthew Island, northerlies at 20 knots. And for the Saturday forecast, north 20 for St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta coast, northwest at 15. Kuskokwim Delta, west at 15. Kuskokwim Delta coastline, northwest 15 for the Pribilofs, west 15 St. Matthew Island. And for the far eastern Beaufort Sea coast, southwest 15, generally the east side though, north at 15, pick it up to 20 knots from the north on the central and western coast, and that extends all the way down to the Bering Strait. Outlook for Saturday, 15 knots, Wales to Cape Thompson, otherwise variable at 10 from Cape Thompson right up until you get to the central coast. They become predominantly west from there eastward with maybe 15 knots over toward Demarcation Point. For tonight, low pressure tracking east. We're just off the eastern Arctic coast. Look for light rain, fog, and drizzle there with showers extending along a weakening Arctic boundary there back in toward the northern Seward Peninsula. Showers continue over the eastern interior but end over the Panhandle, and clouds and rain increase over the southwest interior. That'll spread rain over southern Alaska through and the central interior all the way up to the Brooks Range tomorrow, and even wetter conditions are in store for southern Alaska on Saturday with showers in the Panhandle and fair over the North Slope.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.